there can be no society without a shared memory of its history, where it has been, what are its core values and aspirations, who have been its architects. The Eminent Caribbean Jurist Awards was conceptualized in 2019 to recognize and celebrate those outstanding jurists who, by dint of their brilliance, hard work, and determination, have made a consequential contribution to Caribbean society. The 2021 installation of these awards pays homage to Pioneering Caribbean Women Jurists, who have built and are building the Caribbean society through their contributions to legal activism, adjudication, corporate governance, education, politics, and public service. These are women who have shattered glass ceilings and who have blazed an inspirational trail for the younger generation and indeed for all of us to follow.
The peaceful settlement of disputes between individuals and between individuals and the state is at the core of civilized society. We honor those women who have assumed leadership positions in our judiciaries. They have ensured the governance of our societies according to the rule of law.
Justice Desiree Bernard. The Honorable Madam Justice Desiree Patricia Bernard is a woman who, through a myriad of achievements and well-known firsts, has truly distinguished herself nationally, regionally, and internationally. As a legal luminary and a champion for women's rights and gender equality, Justice Bernard's ascent to prominence represents the heights which an ambitious and hardworking Caribbean woman will always be destined to achieve.
Well, for us, Justice Bernard has always been a very simple, very humble person, never one to say, put herself forward as such, but through her work, through her professionalism, through her commitment to excellence, that propelled her into the spotlight, even though maybe she wasn't the person who wanted to be in the spotlight.
Yes, certainly she has been an inspiration, and she still is, even though she's retired. Indeed, she has, what we would have said all the years, she would have shattered so many glass ceilings within the legal field in Guyana and even regionally, and that in itself, provides an inspiration for us.
But Justice Bernard is just revered by the legal profession in Guyana, especially women lawyers. She's near and dear to us, having founded the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers. But as I think I said earlier, it's her commitment to excellence. Every time she did an admission for a new lawyer, she always said, be committed to excellence. And it might sound cliche, and I use that now when I do admissions for lawyers. It might sound cliche, but it's an exhortation to always aim for the best, always to be at the top of your game, to give of your best at all times, and to be professional. And although one might say, well, you keep repeating it, I think it is a mantra that she passed on to us. And it's a legacy that we really, really are happy to carry on.
A legacy. Legal reform, a rich contribution to the jurisprudence of Guyana, and her passion, her advocacy for all things feminine, all things related to children, all issues related to children, and the fact that she stepped out of her way to let them have a voice, that their voices could have been heard. I think that would be how I will sum up her contribution, because hers was a life of distinction. Her legal career was one of distinction and one of service, and we must add one of humility. When you put all of that into the melting pot, and I can say that it's a rich legacy we have from Justice Bernard.
Yes, in terms of Justice Bernard's, the jurisprudence that she has contributed to both nationally, regionally. Nationally, there are a number of public law cases that she presided over, which gave a lot of guidance to us.
Particularly civil law in Guyana, the prerogative writs for treatment of the UK Crown Office rules of 1906, and in present day, Guyana being a recipient of the British common law, the English common law, and some of their statutes we still have to date. And some countries have moved away, but we are faced with what a quote-unquote archaic procedure. And in it, she has been able to marshal present-day issues using those same procedures to find what we may call remedies, rights and remedies for persons who are seeking reliefs in court. There's one case I can recall, the case of Rika and Hanuman, in which Justice Bernard provided the judgment in that case. And in that case, the whole question of local standard, which is a modern issue too, arose. And as a trailblazer, even from since then, she decided that every citizen has the right to come to the court to present any case in relation to abuse of power. So you did not have to have a specific standing as such within the case, but general right to come to the court. And she also dealt with issues of public functionaries given reasons for their decisions. And she has developed the law over the years in that particular area. Also in another case, the matter of Aubrey Norton, and she also delved into the issues of election matters, election petition cases. And those were really groundbreaking decisions on Justice Bernard's part. Coupled with that, in civil procedure, there are cases where persons come to the court adopting the wrong procedure, and sometimes they're turned away, being the old law, because you haven't approached the court in the correct procedure. And she has been able to say in so many cases, particularly in one named Narayan and Sukwa, that fairness dictates that the issues be resolved despite the incorrect procedure that might have been adopted. So in those particular areas in the civil procedure, the Crown Office rules, prerogative writs, and admin law, Justice Bernard has really been outstanding. If I may also address the issue of law reform in this regard, in the areas of children and women in particular, her contribution has been legendary. We know for a fact that for children, many moons ago, children born out of wedlock were termed bastards. And we had a piece of legislation called Bastardy Act. That's an offensive and even inelegant term. And Justice Bernard has been able to have legislation promulgated to recognize the importance of children all across the board, whether they're born in wedlock or out of wedlock. And stemming from her movement, activism, or engagement, consultations, and all the rest of it, we would have had what is termed the Children Born Out of Wedlock Removal of Discrimination Act, and following that, the Status of Children Act, which meant that all children are of equal status. That, to my mind, was really groundbreaking. So they were entitled to the same inheritance and the same benefits, the same opportunities like children who were born within wedlock. Then there was the Family Independence Provision Act, Married Persons Property Amendment Act, and the Equal Rights Act for women also. Spouses, previously common law spouses weren't really recognized, and of course she was able to see to that they were able to get their benefits and their rights under the law. So those are specific areas that I can highlight for her contribution in Guyana. If I may go regionally, because it's so much, at the CCJ, of course, the famous case of Shanique Myrie, Justice Bernard sat in that case. And then there's also a case dealing with land law. It's called Jairam and Ramdas, or Ramdas and Jairam. In Guyana, we had the two schools of thought on a particular area of law. So we have a series of cases going in one direction, and another set of cases going in a different direction, the opposite direction, on the same issue of law. And that case went to the Caribbean Court of Justice, whether or not equitable rights are recognized in land. And Justice Bernard gave the judgment of the court, and she was able to pinpoint, specifically narrow down the issues and to say, well, the particular position in Guyana, equitable rights are not recognized. And we're grateful for that, because depending on the facts of the case, you may want to go one way, depending on another facts, you want to go another way, depending on the judge and how the judge looked or which cases they followed. But now we have to follow that guidance that she would have provided, having sat in the Caribbean Court of Justice with a panel of judges and having settled the law, I may say, on that particular issue.
In terms of law reform, the empowerment of women and girls was at the forefront of a lot of what she did off the bench. I was fortunate to work along with her on one committee, and she chaired several other committees, which led to major constitutional reform and other legislative reform that empowered women, for the empowerment of women in Guyana. Her contribution in this regard is simply immense. It's immeasurable what she has done for women in Guyana. And for that matter, for the rest of the region, because of course, we are all one Caribbean nation.
Ecstatic, enthusiastic, excited that finally the work of women regionally could have been chronicled and be remembered. The opportunity for persons worldwide to read and to have better insight into what so many pioneering women jurists would have, the work they would have done and their contribution that they would have made. And that is lasting. And to my mind, it's a great achievement.
Well, of course, for us, it was just a well-deserved accolade. I mean, it just flowed from all that she has done to be recognized in this way regionally. And we know that she's been recognized, by the University of the West Indies. She's also been recognized internationally. But to have it recorded, the story recorded is so important as we pass the baton as she has done. And to have not only young lawyers, but just young people, everyone, to know about this person, the person Justice Bernard, and how it is that she came to be what she has been, how she blazed that trail, and so that she could be an inspiration to so many of us. Well, I'm sure she would. I'm sure Justice Bernard would be very pleased, very proud, but again, very humble about it. She would be like, well, I'm thankful. All that I did would be in service to my country and the region. And I think she'd be proud, but not, like excited and, but she'd be proud, yes.
Chief Justice Zela Makala. Described by some as a true daughter of the soil, Chief Justice Zela Makala spent her early years of employment working in the financial sector. In 1971, a unique opportunity to study law presented itself, and she was among the second batch of students to be admitted to the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica. In 1976, following her admission to the bar, she entered the Jamaica court system. Progressing quickly, Chief Justice McCullough moved from prosecutor to magistrate to judge and was promoted to the Court of Appeal in 2006, where she was the only female member. It was a short stint, as by 2007, she was appointed the first female Chief Justice of Jamaica and at the same time conferred with the Order of Jamaica.
First of all, when I heard about the project, I thought it was an exciting project. I didn't give much thought to the question of whether I would have been selected, and so it was a great honor when I was told that I was one of the honorees. And I felt privileged and humbled, to have been so considered. And, it gave me a sense that some of the work that I had accomplished, received recognition.
We were not only recording Justice McCullough's life story, but part of the history of our region, part of the history of our jurisprudence in particular in the region. So that was very exciting. And I was very pleased to be part of that process.
I recall I was working at the bank, and when I heard that the Faculty of Law was now in place, I felt very excited. So I went to the Mona campus. In fact, I'm the second batch of students, entering the Faculty of Law at the Mona campus, where I studied for a year before going on to Barbados for the other 2 years of study.
Well, we met at law faculty when we both enrolled. And by pure coincidence, it is 50 years ago, plus a few weeks, that we both started together. Our last names were close to each other, so we were in the same tutorial group throughout. And so had occasion to study together. And because she was always, as I say, a leader, and to some extent perhaps so was I, we found ourselves often working together on projects. So it wasn't just schoolwork. And then you may know that in those early days, the faculty had just started and one had to go to Barbados. And for most of us, and not just Jamaicans, but people around the region, it was their first time away from home. And so Barbados was, another experience, a wonderful experience, I should add.
Well, I recall quite fondly the time that I spent in Barbados, because it enabled me to meet a lot of other students from across the Caribbean. Many of them are now prominent attorneys at law and judges, some even retired, like myself. And I was able to form friendships which have lasted for a lifetime.
From the very start, it was the fact that she had those previous experiences was something that was noticeable. And I didn't put this in the biography, but she brought a maturity, perhaps, is a word that I could fairly use, to a group of us who were mostly just out of school. And so she had an early leadership role. But over you speak about the arc of her career, she was able to bring, I think, her different experiences to bear in the various different circumstances. And each time she had to transition from being a lawyer to being a judge, to being an appellate judge, and especially to being Chief Justice, which is a totally different role from another judge. I think that she was able to transition smoothly and successfully, in large part because of her early experiences.
Well, I think I enjoyed serving in all those capacities. And may I just say that I had received a scholarship in order to enable me to pursue the study of law, and I was bonded, but I felt it necessary to serve my bond. And I entered the government service as a deputy clerk of the courts and moved up through the ranks and saw it as an opportunity for me to serve my country in all those various capacities. And I enjoyed the journey at every stage. My appointment as Chief Justice was another opportunity, and this was an opportunity for me to serve my country at the highest level. I must say, though, that there were others even equally or more qualified to serve, but I was asked to serve, and I decided that I would give of my best. It was a time when there were a lot of projects in the pipeline, and there were, a lot of criticism in respect of the backlog of cases, among other things. It was also a time when our international partners were offering assistance. And so I grasped that opportunity in order to pursue a number of projects, especially in the area of judicial education and training, continued judicial education and training, because at the time as well, there were many new laws being passed. You must have heard about the lottery scamming, which was just coming into effect at that time, and criminals were using technology to commit crimes. We also had, for example, the Proceeds of Crime Act and other pieces of legislation. And so I felt it was important for me that judges should have that continued education and training. There were other areas as well, many other areas too numerous for me to mention now, but another area was the establishment of a statistical unit at the Supreme Court, because before that unit was established, the responsibility for statistics was under the Ministry of Justice. So this was a way to measure what the court was doing and to set the foundation for us to be able to deploy resources adequately to, say, for example, the various parishes and so on.
Because quite coincidentally, I was in public service in the Solicitor General at the time she assumed that office. I had an insider's view of the flaws in the system. And I think that partly because she, as a resident magistrate and as a senior resident magistrate, she had been very involved in making representations to the then Chief Justice as to problems in the law courts. And you talked about her coming up in the system. She had therefore seen the problems that existed at various levels. And I think that background helped to motivate her to start by wanting to fix the problems from the bottom up. But the two things that I most remember, and I think have most contributed to the improvement of our systems, are the one you just mentioned, judicial training. We have a system that unfortunately assumes that a good lawyer can be a good judge, and that a good parish court judge can be a good high court judge, and so on. It's a false assumption. We are not trained at school to be judges. There are skills that those officers require. She recognized that and placed a focus on judicial training that I think has greatly assisted our judiciary. And the other thing is, we had, and still have, but it was much worse then, a backlog in cases and some difficulties with administration generally that are function in large part of lack of systems. And so Justice McCullough focused on putting systems in place, putting rules in place, streamlining the way the courts ran in ways that greatly improved it.
And something else that we did, we also got all the stakeholders involved to look at the various problems, because one of the big issues had to do with the number of cases and counting them properly, to have a correct assessment as to what backlog we had. And I think that the statistical unit did a great job in that regard. I like to say always, and to credit to the team of judges with which I had to work.
Her personality is one that was consultative, was talk first and try to share both where you want to get to and persuade people to come with you. Ultimately, to make the decision and do it, but try to have people feel it is they're part of the decision, and this is part of their own project. Well, something that I doubt that she mentioned that she would never want to talk about is her role as the first woman in many places, in many areas. She came to a profession that was very, very heavily male dominated, and not just in numbers, but in positions held. She was the first woman to hold many of the positions that she did. Never treated that in itself as significant.
I didn't focus on being a woman as such. I was so busy focusing on so many other things that I didn't look at it from a gender perspective. And insofar as cooperation is concerned, certainly the Jamaican Bar Association and all the other associations and groups and persons with whom I worked, I could say that we received their full support.
And what's important to achieving that is your personality. Is that if you're seen as a leader who you may have the power to do things without consultation, but you never do. You try to get people to buy into the vision. So it's all well and good to have a vision, but if people don't share it, difficult to achieve much. And she had the personality to engage people, to engage stakeholders, and to get buy-in support for her vision.
I hope that in some small way what I have accomplished will motivate other women judges especially and others to aspire to give of their best in the service of their country.
Justice Cynthia Volstein-Montno, resolute and fearless, Madam Justice Cynthia Volstein-Montno is one of two honorees from Suriname. Graduating from the University of Utrecht in 1978 with a specialization in private law, she spent her early career in the Netherlands. She later embarked on the study of international law and by 1986 returned home where she worked for several years in the public sector. Now, despite her success as legal advisor to the President of the Central Bank, in 1993 she joined the Ministry of Justice and Police and later completed a rigorous training program for judges. By late 1997, Suriname had its first female judge, and since 2010, she has been the first female vice president of the High Court of Justice.
I don't see myself really as eminent, but I'm an ordinary person who was able to respond on the calling in my life. Yes, to respond to, listen to my inner voice, my inner calling, that once I must become a judge. Because when I came to Suriname, I did different jobs, but still I had that unrestful feeling in my heart. This is not my ultimate destination, And then one day I saw a newspaper. They were looking for persons to be trained to become judges within 1 year with experience. And I thought, this is very good, after 1 year I can become a judge. That really was my first big, let's say a little bit of test, because after some period of time, the other experienced lawyers said, no, for this money and these conditions, I won't join you. You are a part person, but I won't do that. So I was alone. And then they decided to put me in the regular program for 5 years. And that moment was really like a test to me. Because I said, I came for a program for 1 year. Now I have to study 4 or 5 years. I wanted to quit. But really, after some consideration, I still decided to accept and to go on. But it was like a big test for me, the first big test on this path.
But yeah, that I would say is typically Cynthia Volstein. This was the first group where she joined, the first group, actually 2 groups of lawyers who wanted to become judges. They get all kind of tests, psychological tests, etc. So you might be very good or might be very intelligent, but you also need the right character to get selected for this process? Well, she was one of a few ladies. Well, some of them dropped out, and then at some point there was also the matter of salaries, because they were trainees. They didn't get a very high salary. And in fact, I think the salary that was promised to her during the traineeship was half of what she was earning in her position with the central bank, and that caused a few other lawyers to drop out and say, well, I'm not going to work for that kind of money. Well, she did, because she had put in her mind that this is what I want.
As a matter of fact, in the beginning, I said, well, 1 year would be enough. Afterwards, I don't regret, because we were really trained in depth by many professors, also from Europe and so on. And we were also sent to Curacao for 3 months. And there, I've been trained by Judge Tweed, Judge Lott, and Stuger for the criminal law. And that was really a good, thorough training, you know. And afterwards, I think I got a better preparation after this program. 1 year would be a little bit short.
So I really think that fearless and resolute are the two words that would describe her. If she hadn't been, then she certainly would not have succeeded in being the first female judge. A lot of people told her, well, don't start with that. You know, these judges are all males. They're Surinamese people don't like females to be in a position like that. They won't accept you, etc. She all put that next to her, and she just decided, this is what I'm going to do.
At that moment, people told me, even people very close to me, like, this is a mission impossible in a male profession. How can you become a judge in Suriname? You know, but what is very important is that you have to rely on your inner voice, and you have to break through a lot of barriers that are in front of you.
Yes, in the beginning, people had to get accustomed to a female judge, as it is described. But by now, and that is the interesting part, the majority of the judiciary in Suriname is female. So yes, she really broke the glass ceiling, and after that, it was very difficult to stop. There is no magistracy, so judges do all the judicial work in Suriname, as is usual in the civil law world. But she was the first to take this part of the work, being a juvenile judge. She did that for, I think, 2 years or so. But that was really a pioneering step. The first one to do this, and later on other, I think mostly female judges took over. But yes, she was the first in that too.
In Suriname, we don't have, let's say, a formal separation between first instance and appeal. So, as a judge, even you are a deputy member, you can sit in both instances. That's very different. But of course, it has to do also with a little bit of shortage of judges. When I started, there were 10 male judges. I was the 11th one, the female one. So you see, at that moment, and still now, we only have 25 judges. So because of this shortage of judges, you cannot make a sharp division yet.
Well, she is still vice president of the court, but at some point she acted as president for a few years. And in that period, well, she started certain issues. First of all, opening up to the rest of CARICOM. So she went to Halifax and did trainings there. She visited the CCJ regularly. So we for example, we developed a plan to how to design a code of conduct for the judges, and we started that process under her leadership. And when she decided that it was enough and that another should take over, that was continued. And so Suriname has an elaborate code of conduct for the judges. She opened the door, so to speak. Up to then, the Surinamese judiciary was pretty closed vis-a-vis the rest of CARICOM. She opened that door, and I'm happy to report that has been continued, and more and more there will be, there will be Surinamese judges appearing on conferences, in webinars, etc. So that is a process that has begun under her and has been continued.
We really needed that code. So I was very glad in 2013 that that code really came into effect. Because we as judges also have to set a standard for ourselves, to be competent, independent, and not partial. Yeah.
I always tell people that it strikes me that in our English-speaking part of the Caribbean, with all due respect, of course, but that high-placed persons, as we call them, or very rich persons sometimes, will never find a place in the prison, while there is enough material, at least to start an investigation. Investigations are usually started but end up with nothing. That is different in Suriname. I know of many cases, ministers, ex-ministers, sons of high-placed persons, etc., who have been investigated by the police and were sent to court for adjudication and were convicted and sentenced and sent to jail. And yes, Cynthia Valstein did many of those cases. And of course, it's understandable in a small community, a judge is not very happy to do those kind of cases. I'm not saying that she was happy to do them, but I think she felt a sense of duty that it has to be done. But you have to be a very strong person because, as we all know, if you're a high-placed person, there are all kind of supporters and who would not like the idea that you are there being prosecuted and certainly not being convicted and sentenced. So in a small community, it requires judges with guts. And I'm not saying that others didn't have that, but she certainly had the guts to do that. Even the most recent case where the main defendant was the then head of state. And interestingly, that case was tried by 3 judges, as is usual with very serious cases. No juries, by the way, and all 3 judges were female.
I'm trying. My attitude is to dedicate myself and doing my job. And most of the times, I am, in fact, not so fond of public attention, to be honest. One big challenge was to combine the work with 3 small kids at that moment. But in this respect, I owe a lot to my husband, Oswald, who helped me a lot during this career. Because to combine such a career with 3 kids is not easy. If you don't have a supportive husband, you cannot make it. And you are constantly in like a constraint between your job and your family life. And we have to balance as women how to combine these things. It's not easy. But if you have that persistent heart and that faith, of course, for me it's important. My faith in the creator of the universe who gives me strength in any situation to persist.
Many of these women, but it's the same for men, came from humble beginnings. You see, so the idea that these judges are all from the elite and so forth, it's simply not true. These people started with very humble beginnings, and they work themselves up to the point where they are now. So it is a sign, an inspiration for young jurists. Of course, we're not talking about lawyers, that they can achieve anything they want as long as they work hard. And of course, you have to have the intelligence and the talent, but that doesn't depend on what level you have been born or raised. That all depends on yourself. And we have excellent jurists, and in this case also excellent female jurists. It is a message that needs to be told and needs to be written down, and that has happened. And I'm very happy to have contributed to that.